close your eyes, let your breathing slow, let the day fall away. Tonight, we're going to tell you a story. Not a simple story, not a short story, but the complete history of an entire kingdom. A kingdom that existed in the deep places under the earth, where light was scarce and civilization was carved from stone and will. This is the history of Hallownest. It's a long history, spanning ages we can barely comprehend, involving gods and mortals, light and darkness, consciousness and void. We're going to move through it slowly, carefully, the way you might walk through an ancient library, reading each inscription, understanding each era, letting the weight of time settle gently around you. This history is built entirely from the game's lore. Every fact, every date, every event comes directly from Hollow Knight's dialogue, environmental storytelling, and confirmed canon. Where the game leaves gaps, we'll acknowledge them. Where fans have theories, we'll note them as theories. But everything we tell you tonight is as accurate as the game allows us to be. Before we begin this journey through time, I want to speak with you for just a moment. If you're here, if you've chosen to spend your night falling asleep to the history of a fictional underground kingdom, then you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. You're someone who loves these worlds deeply, who finds comfort in their stories, who wants to understand them completely. If this video helps you sleep, if this careful, thorough telling of Hallownest's history makes your night a little easier, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing. Not because I need the number to grow, but because there are other people out there right now who would love this kind of content and don't know it exists. Subscribing helps them find it, helps the algorithm understand that slow, detailed, respectful lore videos are worth making. And if something in tonight's history resonates with you, if a particular era or event or character catches your attention, leave a comment. Just a word, a name, a moment. Those comments are read, every single one, and they help me understand what matters to you. The video will be here whether you do any of this or not. But if you stay, if you return, I hope you will. Now. Let us begin at the very beginning, in the time before Hallownest. In the age when the underground was ruled by different powers, when bugs lived without the gift of mind, when the world was fundamentally different from what would become. Let me tell you the complete history of Hallownest. In the beginning, there was the void. Not in the beginning of everything, but in the beginning of what we can know, what the game tells us, what exists in the deep places under the world. The void is a substance, an entity, a force that exists outside normal categories of being. It is described as a power opposed to the radiance, opposed to light, opposed to the gods of the surface and the dream. The void exists in the abyss, the deepest part of what would become Hallownest. It is ancient, older than any civilization, older than the bugs who would eventually build their kingdom above it. The void is darkness given form, or perhaps formlessness given presence. It is not alive in the way living things are alive, but it is not dead either. It simply is. The game tells us that the void has a will, not a consciousness in the way we understand consciousness, but a desire, a purpose, a direction. The void wants to be unified, wants all its scattered pieces to come together, wants to be whole. This will become important later, much later, when the Pale King tries to use the void for his own purposes. But in the beginning, the void simply existed in the abyss, in the deep dark, waiting. Above the abyss, in the caverns that would become Hallownest, there were bugs. These bugs were not like the bugs we meet in the game. They had no minds, no consciousness, no self-awareness. They operated on instinct, on programming, on the base drives that govern all living things. Survive, reproduce, continue. These bugs were ruled by the Radiance. The Radiance is a moth goddess, a higher being, an entity of light and dreams. She existed before Hallownest, before the Pale King, before the gift of mind. The moths worshipped her, and through their worship she had power, had presence, had dominion over the dream realm and the bugs who lived in it. The Radiance's rule was not tyrannical in the way we usually understand tyranny. She did not oppress her subjects, did not make them suffer, did not demand sacrifices or tributes. She simply was, and they simply worshipped. And there was a unity in that worship, a connection, a oneness that the bugs would never experience again. Under the Radiance, the bugs had no individual identity. They were part of a collective, a hive mind of sorts, connected through dreams, through instinct, through the Radiance's light. They were happy in the way that beings without consciousness can be happy. They had no awareness of alternatives, no concept of self, no ability to question or choose or change. This was the world before Hallownest, a world of instinct and unity, of light and dreams, of bugs who lived and died without ever knowing they were alive. And then the Pale King arrived. The Pale King was a worm. This is confirmed in the game through multiple sources. The worms were ancient beings, higher beings, creatures of enormous size and power that existed in the world before civilization. They were not gods in the traditional sense, but they were close. They had power, had intelligence, had the ability to shape the world around them. The Pale King, when he was still a worm, was massive. We see his corpse in Kingdom's Edge, the enormous shell that dwarfs everything around it. This was what he was, a creature of such size that his body became part of the landscape, a being that could not be ignored or avoided or forgotten. But the worm chose to change. In a place called the Cast-Off Shell, in Kingdom's Edge, the worm died, or rather, the worm transformed. He shed his massive form, his ancient body, and he became something smaller, something that could walk among the bugs he intended to rule, something that could be seen as a king rather than a force of nature. The Pale King emerged from the worm's corpse. He was small now, bug-sized, with a crown and a pale white body. He had given up his enormity to gain something else, the ability to rule, to build, to create civilization. Why did he do this? The game never tells us explicitly, but we can infer from what we know. The Pale King believed in consciousness, in mind, in the value of thought and choice and individual identity. He looked at the bugs living under the Radiance's instinctual rule, and he saw potential, saw what they could become if they were given the gift of mind. So he gave it to them. The Pale King's light was different from the Radiance's light. Where hers was warm and unifying, his was cold and clarifying. Where hers connected bugs through dreams and instinct, his separated them, gave them individual minds, individual identities, individual wills. The bugs who accepted the Pale King's light gained consciousness. They gained the ability to think, to choose, to question, to build, to create. They gained language, culture, art, science, all the things that civilization requires. They gained self-awareness, the knowledge that they existed as individuals, as separate beings with their own thoughts and desires. But they also gained suffering, because consciousness means awareness of mortality, means the ability to feel pain and loss and fear, means the knowledge that you will die, that everything you love will end, that nothing lasts forever. This was the Pale King's gift, and it was not free. The bugs who accepted it forgot the radiance. They turned away from her light, from her unity, from the warm instinctual connection they had known. They chose the Pale King's cold clarity over the Radiance's warm dreams, and the Radiance was forgotten. Not destroyed, not killed, but forgotten. Sealed away in the dream realm, in the place where she had always existed, but now alone, now abandoned, now without worshippers, without subjects, without the connection that had defined her existence. The Radiance did not accept this quietly, but her revenge would come later, much later, after the kingdom had been built and had flourished, and had begun to believe itself eternal. For now, in this early age, the Pale King had won. The bugs had chosen consciousness, had chosen him, and Hallownest began to rise. The founding of Hallownest is not dated precisely in the game. We don't know how long ago it happened, how many years or centuries or millennia passed between the Pale King's transformation and the events of the game. But we know it happened, and we know what was built. Hallownest was a kingdom carved from stone. The bugs, now conscious, now capable of planning and building and creating, dug into the earth. They created chambers, tunnels, cities, structures of remarkable complexity and beauty. The City of Tears was built, a massive underground city with elegant architecture, with buildings that reached toward the cavern ceiling, with a system that created artificial rain because the bugs wanted to recreate the surface, wanted to have weather even in the deep underground. The city was beautiful. It was a testament to what consciousness could create, what bugs with minds could accomplish. It had art, had culture, had institutions of learning and governance. It had the Soul Sanctum, where scholars studied the magical energy that all bugs possess. It had the Watcher's Spire, where Lurien the Watcher kept vigil over the city. It had homes and shops and public spaces where bugs could gather and talk and live. The city was not the only part of Hallownest. The kingdom spread throughout the underground, encompassing multiple regions, multiple biomes, multiple distinct areas. Greenpath was cultivated, a lush area filled with plants and moss and life. The fungal wastes grew their mushrooms and spores. The crystal peaks sparkled with crystals and minerals. Deepnest, dark and full of spiders, became part of the kingdom through alliance rather than conquest. The Howling Cliffs, the Fog Canyon, the Ancient Basin, all of these areas became part of Hallownest, part of the Pale King's domain. The Pale King ruled from the White Palace, a structure of such grandeur that it was eventually moved into the Dream Realm, existing there as a memory, a dream of what it once was. The White Palace was the seat of power, the centre of the kingdom, the place where the Pale King made his decisions and issued his decrees. It was filled with servants, with guards, with the king's moulds and wings moulds, artificial constructs created to serve without question, without thought, without will. The Pale King married the White Lady, another higher being, a root goddess who shared his vision for Hallownest. Together they ruled, together they built, together they created a civilization that seemed destined to last forever. The Pale King established the 5 great knights, his finest warriors, his most trusted defenders. These were Hegemol, Drya, Isma, Zima, and Ogrim. Each one was exceptional in their own way, each one dedicated to the kingdom, each one willing to give everything to protect what the Pale King had built. Hegemol was massive, armoured, a wall of defence. Drya was precise, deadly, the Pale King's personal protector. Isma was devoted to her post in the waterways. Zima was a warrior from distant lands who joined the kingdom's service. Ogrim was loyal, enthusiastic, unshakable in his dedication. These 5 stood at the peak of Hallownest's military might, and their presence suggested that the kingdom was secure, that it could defend itself against any threat that it would endure. The Pale King also established the Dreamers, though this came later when the threat became clear. But in the early days, in the time of Hallownest's rise, the Dreamers were just citizens: Lurien the Watcher, Monomon the Teacher, and Hera the Beast. Lurien watched over the City of Tears from his spire, devoted to the Pale King, loyal beyond question. Monomon ran the archives, the kingdom's centre of learning, where knowledge was gathered and preserved. Hera ruled Deepnest, the spider kingdom that had allied with Hallownest, maintaining her people's independence while acknowledging the Pale King's sovereignty. These were the pillars of Hallownest: the Pale King and the White Lady, the 5 great knights, the Dreamers, and the countless citizens who lived and worked and built the kingdom into something magnificent. For a time, Hallownest flourished. The bugs who'd been given consciousness used it well. They created art, music, literature. They studied soul, the magical energy that flows through all living things. They built infrastructure, transportation systems, the stag stations that connected different parts of the kingdom. The stags were a species that provided transportation, running routes between stations, carrying passengers through the kingdom's tunnels. They were essential to Hallownest's function, making travel possible, connecting distant regions, allowing the kingdom to operate as a unified whole. Trade flourished. The kingdom had resources: crystals from the Crystal Peak, minerals from the mines, mushrooms from the fungal wastes. These resources were harvested, traded, used to build and expand and improve. Culture developed. The bugs of Hallownest were not just surviving, they were living, creating, expressing themselves. They had theatre, had music, had the pleasure house in the City of Tears, had public spaces where they could gather and celebrate and be together. The kingdom seemed eternal. The Pale King's gift had worked. Consciousness had proven its worth. The bugs were happy, or at least they were living meaningful lives with purpose and choice and the ability to shape their own destinies. But underneath this prosperity, underneath this apparent success, there was a problem. A problem the Pale King knew about. A problem he had created by giving bugs consciousness in the first place. The Radiance had not forgotten. She had not forgiven. And she was reaching out slowly, carefully through the one channel that remained open to her: dreams. The infection began subtly. A few bugs here and there, dreaming strange dreams, seeing orange light, hearing a voice that called to them from somewhere deep in their ancestral memory. The Radiance was trying to reclaim her subjects. She was reaching through the dream realm, through the space where she still existed, trying to pull the bugs back to her, trying to undo what the Pale King had done. But the bugs had changed. They had consciousness now, had individual minds, had identities separate from the collective. The Radiance couldn't simply reconnect them to her unity. Instead, her influence corrupted them, broke them, trapped them in a state between consciousness and instinct, between thought and thoughtlessness. This was the infection. Not a disease in the traditional sense, but a corruption of the mind, a breaking of consciousness, a state where bugs retain just enough awareness to suffer, but not enough to resist. The infection spread slowly at first. A few cases, isolated incidents, bugs who started acting strangely, who developed orange pustules, who became aggressive and hostile. The kingdom's scholars studied it, tried to understand it, tried to find a cure. The Soul Master, head of the Soul Sanctum, believed he could use soul to combat the infection. He experimented on citizens, harvested their life energy, tried to make himself powerful enough to resist the corruption. His experiments failed, or rather, they succeeded only for him, and they required the deaths of hundreds of bugs. The Pale King knew the truth. He understood what the infection was, where it came from, why it was happening. The radiance was reaching out through dreams, through the ancestral memory that still existed in bugs' minds, trying to reclaim what has been taken from her. The Pale King could not simply kill the radiance. She was a god, a higher being, and she existed in the dream realm beyond the reach of normal weapons, normal methods. He needed a solution that was as extraordinary as the problem. He needed a vessel, a being that could contain the radiance, that could seal her away, that could imprison her within itself and hold her there forever. A being with no mind to infect, no will to break, no thoughts for the radiance to corrupt. He needed something hollow. The Pale King turned to the void. The void, ancient and powerful, opposed to the radiance, opposed to light, opposed to the gods. The void could contain her, could imprison her, could seal her away if it could be shaped into the right form. The Pale King and the White Lady conceived children. Not normal children, but vessels, beings designed to be empty, designed to be hollow, designed to contain a god. These children were born, and then they were thrown into the abyss, into the void, to be transformed, to be made into something that could fulfill the Pale King's purpose. Most of them died. The abyss killed them, the void consumed them, the transformation failed. Their corpses piled up in the deep dark, thousands of small broken shells, the Pale King's discarded children. Some survived the abyss. These were tested further. They had to climb out, had to prove they were strong enough, empty enough, worthy enough. Most failed this test too, falling back into the abyss, dying in the attempt. One succeeded. One vessel climbed out of the abyss, proved itself worthy, and the Pale King chose it. This was the Hollow Knight, the pure vessel, the one that would save the kingdom. The Pale King raised the Hollow Knight. He trained it, prepared it, made sure it was strong enough to contain the radiance, empty enough to resist her corruption. He watched it grow, watched it develop, watched it become what he needed it to be. But the Hollow Knight was not hollow. This is the tragedy at the heart of Hallownest's history, the flaw in the Pale King's plan, the reason everything would eventually fail. The Hollow Knight developed a mind. It had thoughts, feelings, some form of attachment to the Pale King. We see this in a memory in the White Palace, a moment where the small vessel looks up at its father, and the Pale King realizes in that instant that his plan has already failed. But he had no alternative. He had already committed, had already sacrificed thousands of children, had already built his entire solution around this one vessel. He couldn't start over, couldn't try again, couldn't admit that the plan was flawed from the beginning. So he sealed the Hollow Knight anyway. He took this child, this being that had developed love or loyalty or some form of connection to him, and he locked it in the Temple of the Black Egg with the radiance screaming inside its mind. The sealing required the dreamers, 3 bugs who would enter eternal sleep, their dreams becoming the locks on the temple, ensuring the Hollow Knight could never escape, ensuring the seal would hold. Hera agreed to become a dreamer in exchange for a child with the Pale King. This child was Hornet, born of the Pale King and Hera, not a vessel but a living being with thoughts and feelings and a voice. Hera wanted her daughter to exist, and she paid for that existence with eternal sleep. Lurien agreed out of loyalty. The Pale King asked, and Lurien said yes, without hesitation, without question. He sealed himself in his tower, sealed his butler with him to ensure no one could reach him, and he slept. Monomon agreed out of duty. She understood what was at stake, understood that her sleep was necessary. But she also understood that her seal made her a target, so she created the Yumu to guard her, and she asked her student Quirrell to take her mask far away, to make it harder for anyone to break the seal. The three dreamers slept. The hollow night was sealed in the Temple of the Black Egg. The radiance was contained, imprisoned within the vessel, unable to spread her infection further. For a time, it worked. The infection stopped spreading. The kingdom stabilized. The Pale King's plan, flawed as it was, seemed to have succeeded. But the Pale King knew the truth. He knew the hollow night was not truly hollow, knew the seal would eventually fail, knew that everything he had built was temporary, that the solution was not permanent, that the kingdom was doomed. The Pale King retreated to the White Palace. He moved it into the dream realm, into a space separate from the physical world, and he stayed there, isolated, unable to face what he had done, unable to fix what he had broken. And then the Pale King died. We find his corpse in the White Palace, sitting on his throne, impaled by his own weapon. The game never tells us exactly how or why he died, but he's gone, and the kingdom is left without its ruler, without its founder, without the being who gave it consciousness in the first place. With the Pale King gone, Hallownest began its slow decline. The kingdom didn't collapse immediately, didn't fall in a single catastrophic moment. It eroded piece by piece as the seal on the hollow night weakened, as the infection began to spread again, as the structures that held the kingdom together started to fail. The hollow night was breaking. Alone in the Temple of the Black Egg, with the radiance tearing at its mind from the inside, it was slowly losing the battle. The thoughts and feelings it should never have had were creating cracks, weaknesses, spaces where the radiance could push through. The infection began spreading again, slowly at first, then faster, then everywhere. Orange light appeared in bugs' eyes. They became hostile, aggressive, mindless. The corruption spread through the Forgotten Crossroads, through the City of Tears, through every part of the kingdom. The citizens tried to resist, tried to fight, tried to find solutions, but there was no solution. The Pale King was dead, the dreamers were asleep, the hollow night was sealed away, and no one knew how to fix any of it. The 5 great knights scattered or fell or transformed. Dryar died defending the Queen's gardens. The traitor lord, a mantis who had sided with the Radiance, led an attack on the gardens, and Dryar stood against him. She fought. She held her ground. And she died doing what she'd always done, protecting what the Pale King had built. Hegemol retreated into dormancy. He went deep into the kingdom, found a place to sleep, and he removed his armour, or it was taken from him. The armour was found by the Watcher Knights, who wore it without knowing whose it was, without understanding that they were wearing the shell of one of Hallownest's greatest warriors. Isma transformed. She gave herself to her post in the royal waterways, became one with the grove she was protecting, became a tree, became the environment itself. Her protection became ambient, permanent, unchangeable. She's still there, still protecting, still performing her function, in a form that's no longer recognisably a knight. Zima became the Grey Mourner. She lost someone she loved, someone whose grave is in the Queen's gardens, and she's been mourning ever since. She wears grey, she calls herself a mourner. and she's defined entirely by her loss, by the love that remains after everything else has been taken away. Ogrim remained at his post. He's still in the royal waterways, still maintaining the tunnels, still doing his duty, even though the kingdom has fallen, even though there's no one left to serve, even though his loyalty is to a king who's dead and a kingdom that's gone. He's the most loyal, the most intact, the most fully himself of all the 5 great knights, and that loyalty has kept him in a role that no longer matters. The kingdom emptied. Citizens fled or died or were infected. Dirtmouth, the small town above Hallownest, became a refuge for the few survivors, the last place where uninfected bugs could gather. The City of Tears became a ruin. The rain still falls, the architecture still stands, but the people are gone. The streets are empty except for infected bugs wandering aimlessly, and the few uninfected citizens who remain hide in their homes, lock their doors, and wait for an end that never comes. The stags died. All of them except one, the last stag, who continues to run his routes through the empty kingdom, maintaining a transportation system that no one uses anymore, keeping the stag stations operational because it's what stags do, because he doesn't know what else to be. The infrastructure failed, the mines were abandoned, the Crystal Peak became dangerous, the fungal wastes were overrun. The kingdom's systems, the structures that had made it function, all of them broke down without maintenance, without people to run them, without the civilization that had created them. Hallownest became a ruin, not a dead ruin, not an empty ruin, but a dying ruin, a place where the infection still spreads, where some bugs still live, where the kingdom is in the process of ending but hasn't quite finished yet. This is the state of Hallownest when the night arrives. The kingdom is fallen but not gone, dying but not dead, a ruin that still has a life in it, still has stories, still has the possibility of an ending. The night is a vessel, one of the discarded ones, one of the failures. It fell back into the abyss when the Pale King chose the Hollow Knight, and somehow it escaped. Somehow it left Hallownest entirely, and it wandered the waste outside the kingdom for an unknown amount of time. The Knight has no memory of this. It doesn't know why it left, why it's returning, what it's supposed to do. It's drawn back to Hallownest by something it doesn't understand, by a call it can't articulate, by a purpose it hasn't yet discovered. The Knight enters Hallownest through the well in Dirtmouth, descends into the forgotten crossroads, and begins exploring the ruins of the kingdom. It fights infected bugs, collects charms and abilities, grows stronger, and slowly begins to understand what happened here, what this place was, what it's become. The Knight meets Hornet. She tests it, fights it, makes sure it's strong enough for what's coming. She'd been waiting for someone, anyone who could end this, who could fix what her father broke, who could free her sibling from its torment. The Knight learns about the Dreamers. To reach the Hollow Knight, to enter the Temple of the Black Egg, the seals must be broken. The 3 Dreamers must be killed, must be released from their eternal sleep, must have their dreams ended so the temple can be opened. The Knight travels to each Dreamer. It fights through the Watcher's Spire to reach Lurien. It navigates the fog of the Teacher's Archives to reach Monomon. It descends into the depths of deepness to reach Hera. Each Dreamer dies or wakes or is released. The seals break. The Temple of the Black Egg opens and the infection spreads further, faster, because the containment is failing, because the Hollow Knight can no longer hold the radiance. The Knight enters the temple. It faces the Hollow Knight, its sibling, the one who was chosen when it was discarded. The Hollow Knight is barely holding on, its movements erratic, desperate. Partway through the fight, it starts stabbing itself, trying to contain the radiance, trying to fulfill its purpose even as it fails. What happens next depends on the knight's choices, on what it's discovered, on what ending it achieves. In the basic ending, the knight defeats the Hollow Knight and takes its place. The knight becomes the new vessel, the new prison for the radiance, and it's sealed in the Temple of the Black Egg. The cycle continues, the solution is temporary, and eventually this seal will fail too, just like the last one. In the sealed siblings ending, Hornet is sealed inside the temple with the knight. She tried to stop it, realised what was happening, and she's trapped there now in the dark with the sibling who's become a prison for a goddess. She's alive, conscious, and she's going to be there for a very long time. In the Dream No More ending, the knight has the void heart, has unified the void, has become something more than just a vessel. When the Hollow Knight is weakened, Hornet holds it down, and the knight uses the Dream Nail to enter its mind, to face the Radiance directly. The fight with the Radiance takes place in the Dream Realm, in the space where she exists, where she's been imprisoned. She's desperate, furious, fighting for her existence, and the knight, channeling the void, channeling all the siblings who died in the abyss, defeats her. The void consumes the radiance. The siblings, unified, become the Shade Lord, a massive entity of pure void, and they destroy the radiance from within the Hollow Knight's mind. The radiance is erased, forgotten completely, removed from existence. The infection ends. The orange light fades from Bug's eyes. The corruption stops spreading. The kingdom is free of the radiance's influence, free of the infection, free of the threat that destroyed it. But the knight is gone. It dissolved into void, ceased to exist as an individual, became part of the whole. The vessel that was discarded, that came back, that saved the kingdom, is no longer there. Hornet is left alone. The radiance is gone. The infection is ended. But the knight is gone too. She's free, but she's lost another sibling, and she's the only one left who remembers what happened, who knows the full story, who can tell the history of Hallownest's fall and salvation. This is where the game ends, with Hallownest saved from the infection but still a ruin, still fallen, still a kingdom that will never be what it was. The Pale King is dead, the White Lady is sealed away, the dreamers are gone, the 5 great knights are scattered or transformed or dead. The survivors will have to build something new. Not Hallownest, but something else, something that grows from the ruins, something that learns from the mistakes of the past. But that's beyond the scope of the game, beyond what we can know. The history of Hallownest ends here, with the infection defeated, with the kingdom saved from complete destruction, with the possibility of a future that's different from the past. Let us pause here for a moment. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of this history settle gently. We've moved through ages, through the rise and fall of an entire civilization. We've seen the Pale King's arrival, the gift of consciousness, the founding of the kingdom, the prosperity, the infection, the desperate solution, the slow decline, and finally the ending, or endings depending on the choices made. This is Hallownest's complete history, as much as the game tells us, as much as we can know. There are gaps, mysteries, things the game never explains. But this is the framework, the structure, the sequence of events that led from the void and the radiance to the knight's arrival, and the kingdom's salvation or continuation. Now let us go deeper. Let us explore the details, the smaller stories, the individual threads that make up this larger tapestry. Let us talk about the ancient history, the wars that preceded Hallownest, the civilizations that existed before the Pale King arrived. Before Hallownest, before the Pale King, before the Radiance's rule over the moths, there were other civilizations in the underground. The game gives us glimpses of these ancient peoples, fragments of their history, evidence of their existence. The dwarves are one of these ancient races. They lived in the underground long before Hallownest, mining, building, creating a civilization in the deep places. The dwarves were skilled craftsmen, miners, builders. They understood the earth, understood how to work with stone and metal and crystal. They created structures that still stand, created tools and weapons that still function, created a legacy that outlasted their civilization. The Shadow People, also called void beings or creatures of darkness, are another ancient race. They're sensitive to light. They navigate the deep dark with ease, and their culture and history are largely unknown to the surface world. The dwarves and the Shadow People were at war. This conflict is known as the Elemental Wars, and it lasted for approximately 1,000 years. The game doesn't tell us why the war started, what the dwarves and Shadow People were fighting over, what grievances or territorial disputes or ideological differences led to a millennium of conflict. But we know the war happened. We know it was brutal, prolonged, and that it only ended relatively recently, meaning that the echoes of it are still felt today, in the mutual suspicion and barely suppressed hostility between the only representatives of each race that we meet, the dwarf in the mines and the shadow person merchant in the sewers. The war ended, but not through victory or defeat. It ended through exhaustion, through both sides realizing that the conflict was unsustainable, that continuing would destroy them both. They made peace, or at least they stopped fighting, and they retreated to their separate domains. The dwarves are nearly extinct now. The one we meet in the mines is possibly the last of his kind in this region, selling items to anyone who can understand his language, which requires finding and donating 4 dwarvish scrolls to the museum. The Shadow People are similarly diminished. The one living in the sewers is the only one we meet who's friendly, who's willing to interact with surface dwellers, who's not hostile or hidden or gone. The ancient war left scars on the underground. The territories are still divided, the suspicions still exist, and the two races once numerous enough to fight a 1,000-year war are now reduced to scattered survivors. This is the world the Pale King entered, a world where ancient races had fought and diminished themselves, where the underground was full of ruins and remnants of civilizations that had risen and fallen before Hallownest was even conceived. The moths were another ancient people. They worshipped the Radiance, lived under her light, existed in the unity she provided. They were not builders like the dwarves, not warriors like the Shadow People. They were dreamers, mystics, beings who lived more in the dream realm than in the physical world. When the Pale King arrived, when he offered consciousness, the moths were the first to accept. They turned away from the Radiance, forgot her, chose the Pale King's clarity over her dreams. This betrayal, this abandonment, is what drove the Radiance to create the infection, what made her reach out through dreams to reclaim what had been taken. The moth tribe still exists in Hallownest, but they're diminished, scattered, and they've forgotten their own history. They don't remember the Radiance, don't remember that they once worshipped her, don't remember that their ancestors' choice is what led to the kingdom's fall. There's one exception, the Seer, an old moth who lives in the resting grounds. She remembers, or she's learned, or she's discovered the truth. She knows about the radiance, knows about the moth's betrayal, knows about the history that everyone else has forgotten. The seer gives you the dream nail, a weapon that can access dreams, that can enter the dream realm, that can fight beings that exist beyond the physical world. She's helping you, helping the night, because she understands that the radiance must be faced, must be defeated, must be ended to save the kingdom. The Mantis tribe is another ancient people, predating Hallownest, existing independently of the Pale King's rule. They're warriors, proud and honourable, with a culture built around combat, discipline and respect. The Mantis tribe refused the infection. When the radiance reached out, when other bugs succumbed, the Mantis said no. They maintained their minds, their honour, their way of life through sheer force of will, through discipline, through their cultural strength. But the tribe split. Some Mantis chose the infection, chose the radiance, and they became traitors. The traitor lord led them, and they were exiled, cast out, declared enemies of the tribe. They live in the Queen's gardens now, infected but still capable of coordinated action, still dangerous, still a threat. The Mantis lords, the leaders of the tribe, maintain their territory in the fungal wastes. They're still honourable, still disciplined, still maintaining their culture even as Hallownest falls around them. When you fight them, it's a test, a challenge, and if you win, they bow to you, acknowledge your strength, and open the path to Deepnest. Deepnest is Hera's kingdom, the spider realm that allied with Hallownest rather than being conquered by it. Hera was the beast, the queen of Deepnest, and her people lived in the dark, in the webs, in the deep places under the kingdom. Deepnest maintained its independence even as part of Hallownest. Hera ruled her people, maintained their culture, kept their ways separate from the Pale King's influence. The alliance was political, practical, but it allowed Deepnest to remain Deepnest, to not be absorbed into Hallownest's culture. When Hera became a dreamer, when she went to sleep, Deepnest lost its queen, and without her, the place fell into chaos. The creatures there are hostile, territorial, dangerous. They're not infected, but they're not organised either. They're just surviving, existing without purpose or direction. The Hive is another independent kingdom that existed within Hallownest's borders. The bees had their own queen, their own structure, their own society. They were part of Hallownest in the sense that they existed within its territory, but they maintained their own governance, their own culture. The Hive is dying now. The bees are infected or dead, the queen is gone, and the Hive Knight is one of the last defenders, fighting a losing battle to protect what's left of his home. These independent kingdoms, these allied peoples, show us that Hallownest was not a monolithic empire. It was a confederation, a collection of different cultures and peoples who acknowledged the Pale King's sovereignty while maintaining their own identities. This diversity was one of Hallownest's strengths. Different peoples brought different skills, different perspectives, different ways of being. The kingdom was richer for it, more complex, more interesting. But it was also a weakness. When the kingdom fell, when the central authority collapsed, these independent peoples were left to fend for themselves. Some, like the Mantis, survived. Others, like the Hive, are dying. The confederation that made Hallownest strong also made it fragile, dependent on the central authority to hold it together. Let us talk now about the Soul Sanctum, about the scholars who studied soul, about their attempts to combat the infection, and what those attempts cost. Soul is the magical energy that flows through all living things in Hallownest. Its life force, essence, the thing that makes bugs alive. Every bug has soul, and skilled practitioners can use it to cast spells, to heal, to perform magic. The Soul Sanctum was Hallownest's centre for soul research. Scholars gathered there to study soul, to understand it, to learn how to use it more effectively. It was a place of learning, of experimentation, of pushing the boundaries of what was possible. When the infection began spreading, the Soul Master, head of the Sanctum, believed he could use soul to combat it. His theory was that if he could gather enough soul, if he could become powerful enough, he could resist the infection, could protect himself and others from the Radiance's influence. His method was to harvest soul from other bugs. He experimented on citizens, drained their life energy, killed them to take their soul and add it to his own. The Soul Sanctum became a place of horror, filled with the corpses of his victims, bugs who came seeking help and were used as test subjects. The Soul Master succeeded in a way. He's not infected, he's bloated with stolen soul, powerful, and he's maintained his mind. But he's also insane, obsessed, and his solution only works for him. He can't save anyone else, can't share his method, can't do anything but continue his experiments and accumulate more soul. When you fight the Soul Master, he's desperate, manic, convinced that his research is important, that his methods are justified. And when you kill him, his research dies with him. All those deaths, all that suffering, and it accomplished nothing except keeping one bug uninfected at the cost of hundreds of others. The Soul Sanctum is a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession, about what happens when the pursuit of knowledge becomes divorced from ethics, about the cost of solutions that only work for the few at the expense of the many. Let us talk about the Colosseum of Fools, about the warriors who fight there, about what it means to maintain a gladiatorial arena in a fallen kingdom. The Colosseum is run by the Fool, a large bug who loves combat, who sees fighting as the highest form of expression, who believes that warriors should test themselves against each other in honourable combat. The Colosseum still operates even though Hallownest has fallen. The Fool is still there, still running the fights, still believing in the glory of combat even though there's no kingdom left to glorify it, no audience left to appreciate it, no purpose left except the fighting itself. The bugs who fight in the Colosseum are there by choice. They're warriors, fighters, people who have nothing left but combat, who find meaning in testing themselves, who would rather die in the arena than live without purpose. The Colosseum is brutal. The trial of the Fool, the hardest challenge, is designed to kill. Most who enter don't survive, but they enter anyway because what else is there? What else is left in a fallen kingdom but the chance to die with a weapon in your hand, to prove yourself one last time, to matter in the only way warriors know how? The Colosseum is a monument to a certain kind of honour, a certain way of being, a certain belief that combat has meaning even when everything else has lost meaning. It's tragic, but it's also admirable in its way. This refusal to give up, this insistence on maintaining standards and traditions even in the ruins. Let us talk about the Grim Troop, about the ritual, about the cycle that exists outside Hallownest's history but intersects with it. The Grim Troop is a travelling circus that appears in Hallownest during the events of the game. They're led by Grim, a mysterious figure who speaks of rituals and cycles and the continuation of something ancient. The troop's ritual involves the Grim Child, Grim's offspring, who must be fed flames to grow stronger. These flames are scattered throughout Hallownest, remnants of the kingdom's fire and passion and life. By collecting them, by feeding them to the Grim Child, you're participating in a ritual that's been repeated countless times, in countless kingdoms, across countless ages. The ritual's purpose is continuation. Grim will die, consumed by the Grim child, and the child will become the new Grim, and eventually that Grim will have a child who will consume it in turn. It's an endless cycle of death and rebirth, of passing the torch, of ensuring that the troop continues forever. You can choose to banish the troop instead of completing the ritual. Brum, a member of the troop who's tired of the cycle, gives you this option. If you take it, the troop leaves, the cycle is broken, and Brum becomes Nim, a musician in Dirtmouth, finally free. The Grim Troop's story is separate from Hallownest's main history, but it intersects with it, shows us that there are other forces in the world, other cycles, other patterns that exist beyond the Pale King's kingdom, beyond the Radiance's influence, beyond the specific tragedy of Hallownest. Let us talk about the lifeblood, about the ancient force that exists beneath everything, about the old blood that predates the Pale King and the Radiance and Hallownest itself. Lifeblood is described as the old blood, something ancient, primal, that existed before the current age. It's blue, glowing, and it provides temporary health, protection, life force that doesn't regenerate but shields you from harm. The lifeblood creatures are peaceful, benevolent, offering their gift without asking for anything in return. They're hidden throughout Hallownest, in secret places, in areas that are hard to reach and easy to miss. The lifeblood core, a charm that provides constant lifeblood, is found deep in the abyss, in a place that requires significant exploration to reach. It's a gift from something ancient, something that exists outside the conflicts between the Pale King and the Radiance, something that simply offers life in a dying kingdom. The lifeblood is a mystery. The game never explains what it is, where it comes from, what it wants. It's just there, offering help, providing protection, being benevolent in a world that is mostly hostile. This benevolence is rare in Hollow Knight. Most forces in the game are either hostile or indifferent. The lifeblood is actively helpful, actively kind, and it asks for nothing. It's a reminder that even in the darkest places, even in fallen kingdoms, there are still forces that offer life, that provide help, that care. Let us talk about the Abyss in more detail, about what it is, about what the void represents, about the will that exists in the darkness. The Abyss is the deepest part of Hallownest, the place where the void exists in its purest form. It's dark, completely dark, and descending into it requires a special lantern that can illuminate the darkness. The void is not empty. This is crucial to understand. The Pale King thought he could use the void to create empty vessels, beings with no mind, no will, no thoughts. But the void has a will of its own, a desire to be unified, a purpose that exists independent of what the Pale King wanted. The vessels are void given form. They're not bugs who contain void. They're void shaped like bugs. And void having a will means the vessels have a will, means they can never be truly hollow, means the Pale King's plan was flawed from the very beginning. The Shade Lord is the void unified. In the Dream No More ending, when the night channels all the siblings, all the vessels who died in the Abyss, they become the Shade Lord, a massive entity of pure void that destroys the Radiance. The Shade Lord is what the void wants to be, unified, whole, complete. It's not evil, not malicious, but it's powerful, and it's opposed to the Radiance, opposed to light, opposed to the gods who exist in the dream realm. The void's will is important because it means the vessels were never tools, never empty containers, never things that could be used without consequence. They were beings with their own nature, their own purpose, their own desire to be unified with their siblings. The Pale King tried to use the void, tried to shape it to his purposes, tried to make it into something it wasn't. And the void, having a will, resisted in its own way by ensuring that the vessels could never be truly hollow, by ensuring that the plan would fail, by ensuring that eventually the void would be unified and would destroy the radiance on its own terms. Let us talk about the White Palace in more detail, about what it represents, about the path of pain, and what it tells us about the Pale King. The White Palace was the Pale King's seat of power, a structure of such grandeur and perfection that now exists in the dream realm. It's filled with buzzsaws and spikes, deadly traps that kill instantly, a fortress designed to keep people out rather than welcome them in. The palace's design tells us something about the Pale King. He valued perfection, valued order, valued control. The palace is immaculate, precise, every element carefully placed, every detail considered, but it's also hostile, dangerous, a place that kills anyone who enters without permission. The Path of Pain is a secret area in the White Palace, a brutally difficult platforming challenge that tests your skill, your patience, your determination. It takes most players hours to complete, and the reward at the end is just a memory, just a cutscene, just a moment from the past. The memory shows the Pale King and the Hollow Knight as a child. The king is there, and the small vessel looks up at him. This is the moment the plan failed, the moment the Pale King realized the Hollow Knight had developed a mind, had thoughts, had some form of attachment to him. The Path of Pain is named appropriately. It's painful to complete, painful to witness, and the memory at the end is painful to see. But it's also important because it confirms what we've suspected. The Hollow Knight was never truly hollow. The plan was flawed from the beginning, and the Pale King knew it. The Pale King's workshop in the White Palace is where the vessels were made, where the process began. It's filled with saws and machinery, tools for creating children designed to be empty. It's a factory, a place of production, and what it produced was suffering. The Pale King's corpse is in the throne room, sitting on his throne, impaled by his own weapon. The game never tells us exactly how he died, whether it was suicide, whether it was an accident, whether something else happened. But he's dead, and he died alone, in his perfect palace, with his kingdom collapsing around him. The Pale King's legacy is complicated. He gave bugs consciousness, gave them the ability to think and choose and build civilization. That's a gift, a genuine gift, something that allowed bugs to become more than they were, to create art and culture and meaning. But he also created the vessels, threw thousands of his own children into the abyss, chose one to be a prison for a goddess, and sealed it away knowing it would suffer. That's a cost, a terrible cost, and it's not clear that the gift was worth it. The Pale King believed that no cost was too great. This was his philosophy, his justification, his reason for everything he did. The kingdom was worth any price, any sacrifice, any amount of suffering. But the kingdom fell anyway. All that cost, all that sacrifice, all those dead children, and it didn't work. The infection spread, the seals failed, and Hallownest became a ruin. Was the Pale King right? Was consciousness worth the cost? The game doesn't answer this question. It presents the facts, shows you what happened, and lets you decide for yourself whether the gift of mind was worth the price that was paid for it. Let us talk about the Radiance in more detail, about who she is, about what she represents, about whether she's a villain or a victim or something more complicated. The Radiance is a moth goddess, a higher being, an entity of light and dreams. She ruled the moths before the Pale King arrived, and they worshipped her. and there was unity in that worship, a connection that the bugs would never experience again. When the Pale King arrived, when he offered consciousness, the moths abandoned the radiance. They chose his light over hers, chose clarity over dreams, chose to forget her. This wasn't the Radiance's choice, wasn't something she agreed to, wasn't a negotiation. It was abandonment, betrayal, a rejection of everything she was. The Radiance was sealed away in the dream realm, forgotten, alone. She didn't die, didn't cease to exist, but she was cut off from her worshippers, from the connection that had defined her existence, from the unity she had provided. The infection is the Radiance's attempt to be remembered. She's reaching out through dreams, through the ancestral memory that still exists in bugs' minds, trying to reclaim her worshippers, trying to undo what the Pale King did. But the infection doesn't restore the bugs to what they were. It doesn't give them back the unity they had under the Radiance. It just breaks them, corrupts them, traps them in a state between consciousness and instinct, where they retain just enough awareness to suffer. Is the Radiance evil? She's destroying a kingdom, killing thousands of bugs, spreading corruption and madness. By any practical measure, she's the antagonist, the threat, the thing that must be stopped. But she's also a god who was forgotten, who was abandoned by her worshippers, who's lashing out in pain and rage at what was done to her. She didn't ask to be forgotten. She didn't choose to be sealed away. She's responding to betrayal, to abandonment, to the loss of everything that gave her existence meaning. The Radiance is a tragic figure. She's not right, but she's not entirely wrong either. The moths did abandon her. The Pale King did take her worshippers, and she's been alone in the dream realm for ages, forgotten, sealed away, unable to accept what happened to her. When you fight the Radiance, when you defeat her, you're not just killing a boss. You're erasing a god, removing her from existence, ensuring she'll be forgotten completely. It's necessary to save the kingdom, necessary to end the infection, but it's still the death of a being who was once worshipped, who once had purpose, who once mattered. Let us talk about Hornet in more detail, about who she is, about her role in Hallownest's history, about what she represents. Hornet is the daughter of the Pale King and Hera the Beast. She was born as part of a bargain. Hera agreed to become a dreamer in exchange for a child with the Pale King. Hera wanted her daughter to exist, and she paid for that existence with eternal sleep. Hornet is not a vessel. She's not void, not hollow, not empty. She's alive in the way normal bugs are alive, with thoughts and feelings and a voice. She can speak, can express herself, can make choices based on her own will. Hornet is also alone. Her mother is asleep, possibly forever. Her father is dead. Her sibling, the Hollow Knight, is sealed away and suffering. She's the only one left who remembers the full story, who understands what happened, who knows the truth about Hallownest's fall. Hornet guards the kingdom's ruins. She tests anyone who enters, fights them, makes sure they're strong enough for what's coming. She's looking for someone who can end this, who can fix what her father broke, who can free her sibling from its torment. When you fight Hornet the first time, in Greenpath, she's testing you. She wants to see if you're capable, if you're strong enough, if you're worth her time. And when you win, she acknowledges you, calls you Little Ghost, and lets you pass. When you fight Hornet the second time, in Kingdom's Edge, she's testing you again, making sure you're ready for what's coming. And when you win, she respects you, understands that you might be the one who can end this. In the endings where you take the Hollow Knight's place, Hornet tries to stop you. She realizes what you're about to do, understands that you're condemning yourself to the same fate as your sibling, and she screams, "No!" as the door seals. She has to watch it happen again, has to see another sibling sealed away, has to live with the knowledge that the cycle is continuing. In the sealed siblings ending, Hornet is trapped inside the temple with you. She's sealed in there, in the dark, with a sibling who's now a prison for a goddess. She's alive, conscious, and she's going to be there for a very long time, possibly forever. Only in the Dream No More ending is Hornet truly free. The radiance is destroyed, the infection is ended, and Hornet is released from her duty, from her burden, from the role she's been playing. But the night is gone, dissolved into void, and Hornet is still alone, still the only one left who remembers. Hornet's story is about duty, about burden, about being the one who has to keep going when everyone else has fallen or failed or given up. She's the guardian of a fallen kingdom, the keeper of a history that almost no one remembers, the one who has to make sure that the ending, whatever ending comes, is the right one. Hornet is also the protagonist of Hollow Knight, Silk Song, the sequel that's currently in development. Her story continues beyond Hallownest, beyond the kingdom's fall, into whatever comes next. But that's beyond the scope of this history, beyond what we can know from the first game. Let us talk about the minor characters, the NPCs who populate Hallownest's ruins, who give us glimpses of what life was like before the fall, who show us the human cost of the kingdom's collapse. Elderbug lives in Dirtmouth, the small town above Hallownest. He is old, kind, and lonely. He's watched the town empty out as people left or died, or went down into Hallownest and never came back. He's one of the last ones left, and he stays because it's home, because he doesn't know where else to go. Elderbug talks about the old days, about when Dirtmouth was lively, when there were more people, when the town had a purpose. Now it's just him and a few others, waiting in a town that's slowly dying. But he's grateful for company, grateful when you sit with him on the bench, grateful to not be alone for a moment. Sly is a shopkeeper and a former nail master. He's old now, retired from fighting, but he was once a great warrior. In the God Home you can fight him at his peak, and he's one of the hardest bosses in the game, fast and aggressive and deadly. But in the regular game, Sly is just a shopkeeper. He's left his warrior days behind, chosen a peaceful life, and he's content with that. He's one of the few characters who's made peace with aging, with no longer being what he once was. Quirrell is Monomon's student. He left Hallownest long ago, carrying Monomon's mask, protecting her seal by keeping it far away. But he forgot why he left, forgot what he was protecting, forgot everything except a vague sense of purpose. Quirrell returns to Hallownest around the same time as the knight. You meet him throughout your journey, and he's always kind, always thoughtful, always wondering about the ruins, about what this place used to be. When you return Monomon's mask to the archives, Quirrell remembers. He remembers everything. His teacher, his purpose, the reason he left, and he helps you break the seal, helps you kill his teacher, because he understands that it's necessary, that the kingdom needs to end, that holding on is just prolonging the suffering. After Monomon dies, Quirrell goes to the Blue Lake. He sits there looking at the water and he leaves his nail behind. The implication is clear, though the game never shows it explicitly. Quirrell has fulfilled his purpose, and he has nothing left to live for. Myla is a miner in the Crystal Peak. She's cheerful, optimistic, singing while she works. She's mining for crystals and she's happy to see you, happy to have someone to talk to. Her song is called Buried Delight, and it's about finding treasure, about the joy of discovery. If you return to Myla later, after you've progressed further in the game, she's infected. The orange light is in her eyes and she's still mining, but she's not singing anymore. She's just hitting the wall over and over mindlessly. If you return even later, she attacks you. She's fully infected, hostile, and you have to kill her or leave her there. There's no way to save her. The infection takes her, and all you can do is witness it. Watch her lose herself piece by piece until there's nothing left but the corruption. Myla's transformation is one of the game's most effective examples of the infection's progression. You see her as a person, you hear her sing, you know she has a life and dreams, and then you watch her lose all of it, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The nailsmith is a master craftsman who upgrades your nail. He's obsessed with his craft, with creating the perfect weapon, with achieving mastery, and when you bring him the materials for the final upgrade, he creates it, the pure nail, the strongest weapon in the game. After creating the pure nail, the nailsmith asks you to kill him. He's achieved his life's work, created the perfect nail, and he believes there's nothing left for him. He wants to die at the peak of his achievement, killed by the weapon he created. You can choose to kill him or refuse. If you kill him, he dies happy, fulfilled, at peace with his death. If you refuse, he's initially disappointed, but then he realizes there might be more to life than just his craft. He eventually moves in with Shio, one of the nail masters, and they become partners. The nailsmith finds happiness, finds a life beyond his obsession. Cloth is a warrior travelling through Hallownest, looking for adventure, looking to prove herself. She's friendly, enthusiastic, and she clearly admires the knight's strength. You can encounter her in several places, and each time she's fighting, testing herself, trying to be brave. In the Traitor Lord fight, if you've met her enough times, she appears to help you. She fights alongside you, and she's genuinely helpful, dealing damage and drawing aggro. But Cloth dies in that fight. After you defeat the Traitor Lord, she's mortally wounded. She tells you she's glad she could help, glad she could be brave, glad she could die in battle like a true warrior. Cloth wanted to be a hero, wanted to matter, wanted to die well, and she got what she wanted. But it's still sad, still a loss, still a person who could have lived and chose to die for a cause that wasn't even hers. These minor characters, these NPCs who populate the ruins, show us the human cost of Hallownest's fall. They're not just statistics, not just background elements. They're people with lives and dreams and stories, and the kingdom's collapse has affected each of them in different ways. Some, like Elderbug, survive by staying in place, by maintaining their routines, by refusing to give up even when everything around them is dying. Others, like Quirrell, fulfill their purpose and then have nothing left. Others, like Myla, are consumed by the infection, lose themselves piece by piece. Others, like Cloth, choose to die on their own terms, to matter in the only way they know how. Each of these stories is a tragedy in its own right, a small piece of the larger tragedy that is Hallownest's fall. And together they show us that the kingdom was not just a place, not just a political entity, but a collection of people, of lives, of stories that mattered. Let us talk about the music, about Christopher Larkin's soundtrack, about how the music tells Hallownest's history in its own way. The music of Hollow Knight is integral to the game's storytelling. Each area has its own theme, its own mood, its own musical identity. The music tells you where you are, what you're feeling, what the place means. The City of Tears theme is melancholic, beautiful, full of longing and loss. It's the sound of a city that was once magnificent and is now mostly empty. The sound of rain falling on empty streets. The sound of beauty that no one is left to appreciate. The Green Path theme is gentle, peaceful, full of life and growth. It's the sound of nature persisting even in the underground. The sound of plants and moss and living things that continue regardless of what happens to the kingdom around them. The Deepness theme is unsettling, tense, full of dread. It's the sound of a place that was never meant to be safe, that was always dangerous, that's now even more hostile because its queen is gone and its people are without direction. The Mantis Lord's theme is intense, rhythmic, honourable. It's the sound of warriors testing each other, of combat as ritual, of respect expressed through fighting. It's one of the game's most memorable tracks because it captures the Mantis culture perfectly. Disciplined, proud, honourable. The Sealed Vessel theme, which plays during the Hollow Knight fight, is tragic, mournful, beautiful. It's the sound of a being that's been suffering alone in the dark for years, that's still trying to fulfill its purpose even as it fails. That's fighting you not out of malice, but out of duty. It's one of the most emotionally powerful pieces in the game. The Radiance theme is intense, chaotic, desperate. It's the sound of a god fighting for her existence, of light and fury and rage, of something that refuses to be forgotten, that refuses to accept what's been done to her. Christopher Larkin's soundtrack is a masterpiece of video game music. It's atmospheric, emotional, and it enhances every moment of the game. The music tells Hallownest's story as effectively as the dialogue and environmental storytelling, and it's one of the reasons the game resonates so deeply with players. Let us talk about the art, about the visual design, about how Team Cherry created a world that feels real, that feels lived in, that feels like it has history. Hollow Knight's art style is distinctive, hand-drawn, detailed, full of character. Every area has its own visual identity, its own colour palette, its own aesthetic. The City of Tears is blue and elegant, Green Path is green and lush, Deepness is dark and claustrophobic. Each area looks different, feels different, tells you something about what it is and what it was. The character designs are memorable. Each NPC has a unique silhouette, unique animations, unique visual characteristics. You can recognise characters at a glance, can tell who they are from their shape and movement and design. The environmental storytelling is exceptional. You can look at a room and understand what happened there, what it was used for, what it means. The Soul Sanctum is filled with corpses, telling you immediately that something terrible happened here. The White Palace is filled with buzzsaws and spikes, telling you that the Pale King valued security and perfection over accessibility. The Abyss is filled with broken vessels, telling you the cost of the Pale King's plan. The art tells Hallownest's history without words. You can walk through the ruins and understand what this place was, what happened to it, what it's become. The visual design is not just beautiful, it's informative, it's meaningful, it's part of the storytelling. Team Cherry, a small indie studio, created this world with incredible care and attention to detail. Every sprite, every background, every animation was crafted with love, with respect for the world they were building, with understanding that the visuals are as important as the gameplay and the story. Let us talk about what Hallownest represents, about what the kingdom means thematically, about what Team Cherry is saying through this story. Hallownest is a story about the cost of civilization. The Pale King gave bugs consciousness, gave them the ability to build and create and think. But that gift came with suffering, with awareness of mortality, with the knowledge that everything ends. Was it worth it? The game doesn't answer this question definitively. It shows you both sides, the beauty of what was created, the art and culture and meaning that consciousness made possible, and the cost, the suffering, the thousands of dead children, the kingdom's eventual fall. Hallownest is also a story about the dangers of hubris. The Pale King believed he could control the void, could create empty vessels, could seal away a god. He believed that no cost was too great, that the kingdom was worth any sacrifice, and he was wrong. The plan failed, the kingdom fell, and all that sacrifice accomplished nothing except prolonging the inevitable. Hallownest is a story about forgotten gods and the consequences of abandonment. The Radiance was forgotten, sealed away, abandoned by her worshippers, and she didn't accept this quietly. She reached out, she fought back, she destroyed the kingdom that had forgotten her. The story asks, what do we owe to the things we've left behind? What happens when we forget what we used to worship, what we used to believe, what we used to be? Hallownest is a story about duty and sacrifice. The Hollow Knight, the Dreamers, the 5 great knights, all of them sacrificed themselves for the kingdom. They gave everything, and it wasn't enough. The story asks, when is sacrifice justified? When does duty become self-destruction? When should we let go instead of holding on? Hallownest is a story about endings. The kingdom falls, the people die, the civilization ends. But the ending is not meaningless. The kingdom existed, the people lived, the civilization mattered. Even in failure, even in loss, even in tragedy, there's meaning. The story asks, what makes a life, a civilization, a kingdom worth it, even when it ends? These themes resonate with players because they're universal. We all face questions about cost and sacrifice, about duty and letting go, about what we owe to the past and what we're building for the future. Hallownest's story is specific, detailed, fantastical, but the questions it asks are deeply human. Let us talk about the Knight, about what it represents, about why a silent, empty protagonist works so well for this story. The Knight is a vessel, one of the discarded ones, one of the failures. It has no voice, no personality, no expressed thoughts or feelings. It's a blank slate, a cipher, a character defined entirely by actions rather than words. This silence is powerful. The Knight doesn't tell you what to think, doesn't explain its motivations, doesn't narrate its journey. You project onto it, you fill in the blanks, you decide what it means, what it feels, what it's trying to accomplish. The Knight is also void, and void has a will. So the Knight is not truly empty, not truly hollow, not truly without purpose. It's driven by something, by the void's desire to be unified, by the need to end the infection, by the pull of Hallownest calling it home. The Knight's journey is about returning. It left Hallownest, wandered the wastes, and came back. It's returning to a place it doesn't remember, to fix a problem it didn't create, to fulfill a purpose it was never chosen for. It's the discarded child coming home, the failure proving itself, the one who wasn't good enough becoming the one who saves everything. This is a powerful narrative arc. The Knight was thrown away, deemed imperfect, left to die in the abyss. And it survived, it escaped, it came back, and it did what the chosen one couldn't do. It ended the infection, freed its sibling, defeated a god. The Knight's silence allows players to connect with it in their own way. Some see it as a hero, some as a tool, some as a tragic figure, some as an expression of the void's will. All of these interpretations are valid. All of them are supported by the game, and the Knight's silence allows all of them to coexist. Let us talk about the endings in more detail, about what each one means, about what they tell us about Hallownest's fate. The Hollow Knight ending is the basic ending. You defeat the Hollow Knight and take its place. You become the new vessel, the new prison for the Radiance, and you're sealed in the Temple of the Black Egg. The cycle continues. The solution is temporary, and eventually this seal will fail too, just like the last one. This ending is tragic because it solves nothing. The infection is contained but not ended. The Radiance is imprisoned but not defeated, and you, the Knight, are now suffering the same fate as your sibling, alone in the dark with a goddess screaming inside your mind. But this ending also shows that the cycle can continue, that the kingdom can be saved temporarily, that there's always another vessel, another sacrifice, another way to postpone the inevitable. It's not a good ending, but it's an ending that maintains the status quo, that keeps Hallownest from complete collapse. The sealed siblings ending is darker. Hornet is sealed inside the temple with you. She tried to stop you, realised what you were about to do, and she's trapped there now, in the dark, with a sibling who's become a prison for a goddess. This ending is tragic because it takes Hornet, the one character who was free, who had agency, who could have built something new, and it traps her in the same cycle that destroyed everything else. She's alive, conscious, and she's going to be there for a very long time, possibly forever, watching you suffer, unable to help, unable to escape. But this ending also shows the cost of trying to help, the danger of getting too close, the way that Hallownest's tragedy consumes everyone who tries to fix it. Hornet wanted to save her sibling, wanted to end the cycle, and she got trapped in it instead. The Dream No More ending is the true ending, the one that actually solves the problem. You have the Void heart, you've unified the Void, and when the Hollow Knight is weakened, you enter its mind and face the Radiance directly. The fight with the Radiance is intense, desperate, and when you defeat her, the Void consumes her. The siblings, unified, become the Shade Lord and destroy the Radiance from within the Hollow Knight's mind. The Radiance is erased, forgotten completely, removed from existence. The infection ends. The orange light fades from Bug's eyes. The corruption stops spreading. The kingdom is free of the Radiance's influence, free of the infection, free of the threat that destroyed it. But the night is gone. It dissolved into void, ceased to exist as an individual, became part of the whole. The vessel that saved the kingdom no longer exists, and Hornet is left alone, free but without her sibling, victorious but at the cost of another loss. This ending is bittersweet. The problem is solved, the infection is ended, the kingdom is saved. But the cost is high, the night is gone, and Hornet is alone. It's a victory, but it's not a happy ending. It's just an ending, a conclusion, a way for the story to be complete. The Embrace the Void ending from the Godmaster DLC is even more complex. The Knight becomes a god of void, the Shade Lord manifests in the physical world, and the God-Seeker witnesses it. She's consumed by the void, destroyed by the very thing she sought to worship. This ending shows the void's full power, shows what happens when it's truly unified, shows that the void is not just a tool or a resource, but a force in its own right, a god that rivals the Radiance in power. But this ending also shows the danger of worship, the danger of seeking gods, the danger of wanting transcendence. The God-Seeker wanted to find a god powerful enough to worship, and she found one, and it destroyed her. She got what she wanted, and it killed her. Each ending tells us something different about Hallownest, about the void, about the cost of solutions, about what it means to save a kingdom. None of them are purely happy, none of them are without cost, and all of them show that even victory is complicated, even success comes with loss. Let us talk about what happens after the endings, about what the future holds for Hallownest, about what the survivors will build. The game doesn't show us this. It ends with the infection defeated or contained, with the night gone or sealed away, with Hornet free or trapped. What happens next is beyond the scope of the game, beyond what we can know, but we can imagine. The survivors, the few uninfected bugs who remain, will have to build something new. Not Hallownest, because Hallownest is gone, its structures broken, its institutions failed, its king dead. But something else, something that grows from the ruins, something that learns from the mistakes of the past. Maybe they'll build a new kingdom, a new civilization, a new way of being. Maybe they'll reject the Pale King's gift, reject consciousness, return to instinct. Maybe they'll find a middle way, a balance between thought and unity, between individual identity and collective connection. Maybe Hornet will lead them. She's the only one left who knows the full story, who understands what happened, who can teach the survivors about the past so they don't repeat it. She's the daughter of the Pale King and Hera, the sister of the Hollow Knight and the Night, the guardian of the ruins. If anyone can build something new, it's her. Or maybe the survivors will just scatter, will leave the ruins, will find new places to live, will start over somewhere else. Maybe Hallownest will be abandoned completely, will become a true ruin, a place that exists only in memory, a cautionary tale about the cost of civilization. We don't know, the game doesn't tell us, and maybe that's appropriate. Maybe the story of Hallownest is complete, and what comes after is a different story. A story that belongs to the survivors, a story that we don't need to see. Let your breath slow now. Let the weight of this history settle gently around you. We've moved through the complete history of Hallownest, from the void and the radiance to the Pale King's arrival, from the kingdom's founding to its prosperity, from the infection's spread to the desperate solution, from the slow decline to the night's arrival, and the kingdom's salvation or continuation. We've seen the rise and fall of an entire civilization, the cost of consciousness, the price of hubris, the consequences of forgotten gods, the weight of duty and sacrifice, the meaning of endings. This is Hallownest's history, as complete as the game allows us to know it. Every fact, every event, every detail comes directly from Hollow Knight's lore, from its dialogue and environmental storytelling and confirmed canon. There are gaps, mysteries, things the game never explains. We don't know exactly when Hallownest was founded, how long the kingdom flourished, how long the infection spread before the Hollow Knight was sealed. We don't know exactly how the Pale King died, what happened to Hegemol, whether Quirrell survived. We don't know what the lifeblood is, where the Grim Troop comes from, what the Void truly wants, but we know enough. We know the shape of the story, the arc of the history, the rise and fall of the kingdom. We know the major events, the key figures, the decisions that mattered. We know Hallownest's history well enough to understand it, to honour it, to remember it. And now, finally, we can rest. Sleep now. Let Hallownest's history settle into memory. Let the kingdom rest in the gentle dark of your mind. Let the story be complete. The Pale King gave bugs consciousness, and they built a civilization. The radiance reached out through dreams, and the civilization fell. The Hollow Knight was sealed away, and it suffered. The night returned, and the kingdom was saved, or the cycle continued, or the infection ended, depending on the choices made. This is the history. This is what happened. This is the story of Hallownest, told completely, told accurately, told with respect for the world that Team Cherry created. You've heard it all now. Every era, every event, every major figure, every important detail. You know Hallownest's history as well as anyone can know it, as well as the game allows us to know it, and you can sleep, knowing that you've witnessed the complete history of a kingdom, that you've honoured it by paying attention, that you've made it matter by caring about it. The kingdom is quiet now. The infection has ended, or it's contained, or the cycle continues. But either way, the story is told, the history is complete, the kingdom has been remembered. Rest now. Let the history fade into the gentle dark of sleep. Let Hallownest be a memory, a story, a world that existed in pixels and code, but that mattered because you cared about it. The void is still. The radiance is gone or imprisoned. The pale king is dead. The white lady is sealed away. The dreamers are released. The 5 great knights are scattered or transformed or dead or still at their posts, and you are here, resting, letting go, allowing yourself to drift into the same peaceful dark that finally, mercifully, covers Hallownest. The kingdom existed. The people lived. The civilization mattered. Even in failure, even in loss, even in tragedy it mattered. And you've honoured it by listening to its complete history, by understanding what it was, by remembering what it became. Sleep well. The history is told. The kingdom is remembered. The story is complete. Good night. Let Hallownest rest in your dreams, a kingdom that was beautiful and flawed and tragic and meaningful. Let the history settle into memory, a story that was worth telling and worth hearing. Let yourself rest, knowing that you've witnessed the complete history of Hallownest from beginning to end, from the void to the radiance to the night's arrival and the kingdom's salvation. The history is complete. The story is told. The kingdom is remembered. Rest now. The underground is quiet. The ruins are patient. The history waits in the stone, in the memories, in the stories that we tell about kingdoms that rise and fall and matter, even in their ending. Sleep. Hallownest's history is complete, and you were there to witness it, to honour it, to remember it. That's enough. Rest now. Good night.